looking at what are the orders, enablers, and imperatives uh, for 2.1 million barrels per day production target and overall increase in oil and gas production in Nigeria. Today, we will be listening to a keynote address from a distinguished speaker who is at the forefront of petroleum production policy, not only in Nigeria, but also in Africa. And we also have a very um, distinguished lineup of speakers who will be joining our panel session to really dive into this topic and do justice to it. And so without wasting much of our time, we're going to start with opening remarks from the chair of the NBA-YLF Energy and Sustainability Committee. After that, we'll have the keynote address from our guest speaker for today, Dr. Omar Farouk. And thereafter, we would dive into the panel session with our speakers. And after that, we take questions and answers from the speakers and from the general audience as well. A few housekeeping rules. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box. I know that there's a lot of activity going on in that chat box right now, and people dropping their SCN numbers. Please, you do not have to do that. We have your registration details. In the course of this webinar, we would be dropping a feedback form list, which would request for this information, especially from the lawyers. And we would use this feedback form to coordinate with the MBA Institute of Continuing Legal Education so that we can get the right career professional development points to the attendees of this program. So you don't have to keep dropping your SCN number in the chat box. Let's use the chat box for questions and enjoy the sessions. Thank you very much. Now I would invite the chair of the NBA-YLF Energy and Sustainability Committee, Mr. Thomas Fortune, for his opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Omotayo. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, please, Omotayo, confirm that you can hear me.
Very loud and clear, please go ahead.
Right. Good morning, everyone. Morning, Your Excellency, Dr. Omar Farouk, Ibrahim, to all of our other speakers, Mr. Nelson Wilbert of Heritage Energy, Rosario Osobase of Tenaris, Wisdom Enang of formerly of ExxonMobil. We don't have Oghogho Makinde yet. Omotayo, please find out what's the challenge with that. As by way of an introduction, Fortune is my name. I work at the National Assembly of Nigeria as a senior legislative aide, the deputy speaker at the House of Reps. I also chair the Energy and Sustainability Committee at the Nigerian Bar Association Young Lawyers Forum. And in that series, our efforts at conversations and driving healthy conversations on the future of Africa's energy. As a committee, we've carried out several activities that are geared towards pursuing this unique goal. We want to achieve a situation where young lawyers are at the heart of shaping Nigeria's and indeed Africa's energy policy as the largest bar in Africa. So we as a matter of urgency, prioritize knowledge sharing and thought leadership sessions like this one, where we are able to gather top and senior, some of the finest persons in the industry to come and discuss critical issues that cut across the entire value chain. As a committee, our purview cuts across the oil and gas space, the power and renewable ecosystem, the environment climate ecosystem, as well as the mining and extractives ecosystem. And as such, these webinars are one of the ways we drive conversations around these four focal areas. We usually rotate them. It's usually done every month. But for the past 2 months, we've not been able to have one because of so many exigencies. A special thank you to all of the speakers who have, in spite of their busy schedule, decided to come on here today. To all of our participants as well, I welcome you all. The meeting room is full. Unfortunately, we can only accommodate 500. It's being streamed live on Zoom, so we've had over 5,000 registrations, and you can be sure that you have a massive audience listening to the conversations that will be had today. Just so that I don't take time and can go straight into the webinar, since we're already 10 minutes in. I was supposed to speak for 10 minutes, but because of the 5-minute delay with starting, I'm just going to wrap up to say some of our key projects, and this is where we usually call for all of the support from all of the organizations that are represented here and to the general public, because I know some media persons are also here, and this should also make the news. We have very key flagship projects. One of them is our Energy and Sustainability Bulletin, which is a magazine, a flagship magazine of the committee and the YLF, the NBA-YLF. It's an attempt at really democratizing access to knowledge. So we feel like through our own platform, we are able to project some of the key information around the energy space that somehow contributes to the knowledge base of the young lawyers community, which is largely our readership. We also have what we unveiled, our sustainable energy propositions. We tag them the SCPs, and they're modeled after the 17 SDGs. As a matter of fact, they are 17 in number. They cut across youth advocacy points, some initiatives of the YLF that are essentially get to us saying that we can collectively build a sustainable energy ecosystem that works for all and serves us in the future. So, and then finally, we have these knowledge sharing sessions, such as this webinar. We have several other projects. We launched the tree planting project, which is another effort at being hands-on and doing all of the things that are essential for us to balance net zero ambitions. So without further ado, I welcome you all to this session. It promises to be engaging. I encourage as many persons as possible to reach out and let's see how we can make great magic for the future. Thank you all once again for joining the session. Omotayo, if you are ready, I think we can go ahead to introduce our keynote speaker, Your Excellency, Omar.
Thank you very much, Fortune. Thank you for the very warm welcome remarks. Yes, we're going to proceed to introduce our keynote speaker for today. Permit me to just take a second to take a citation. As we all know, Dr. Omar Farouk Ibrahim is the Secretary General of the African Petroleum Producers Organization, and he has been in this role since January 2020. And in this role, he leads the coordination of oil policies across Africa, promoting cooperation and sustainability within the continent's energy sector. Currently, Dr. Ibrahim also serves as the regional chair for Africa at the World Energy Council, where he contributes to shaping energy strategies and fostering collaboration among African nations, right? And prior to these two roles, Dr. Ibrahim was governor for the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, and he was on the board of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum from 2015 to 2020. At the time, he was also the advisor to 4 successive Nigerian ministers of petroleum resources between 2009 and 2020. And this, meant that he represented Nigeria in various international energy organizations, right? And very, very earlier in his career, he was the head of the Public Relations and Information Department at the OPEC sectors in Vienna, and he was also the editor-in-chief of the OPEC Bulletin. In terms of academic qualification, Dr. Ibrahim holds a PhD in political science from Rutgers University in the USA, and also has a background in academia, having lectured at the Bayero University, Kano. I mean, you would agree with me that his extensive experience and leadership makes him very fit to be our guest speaker for today. I'm very honored to have him. We're very grateful for him taking time out of his very busy schedule to be with us today, and we thank him very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Omar Farouk Ibrahim. Thank you very much. You have the floor, sir.
Please,
Thank you very much.
be sure to always say Your Excellency, Dr. Omar Farouk Ibrahim. You may have the.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the organizers for the invitation to give a keynote address on this and also to participate in the panel. Allow me to skip all protocols, please, and let's go straight to the point. I'd like to begin with the theme of the 5th edition of this webinar series, Unpacking Nigeria's 2.1 million barrels per day production target. The organizers described the 2.1 million barrels per day target as ambitious. The word ambitious connotes having a strong desire for success, for breaking new grounds. But will Nigeria be breaking any new grounds if it reaches 2.1 million barrels per day in 2025? Or is it that we have come to accept failure so much so that we have forgotten where we are coming from? What new grounds are going to be broken in 2025 if Nigeria succeeds in achieving the 2.5 million MBD target? Have we forgotten that 20 years ago, in 2005, I mean, Nigeria's daily crude oil production was about that number, 2.4 plus. And this figure did not include condensates. It's just crude oil. And remember, the fall in crude oil production cannot be linked to a fall in Nigeria's proven crude oil reserves. In fact, Nigeria's proven crude oil reserves rose from 36.2 million barrels in 2005 to about 37.5 today. What then accounts for the decline in production? Many would attribute the decline to lack of finance to execute gas projects, including the provision of oil and gas infrastructure, insecurity in the oil-producing areas, unattractive fiscal regulatory regimes, and absence of sub-regional and regional energy markets. While this may explain some of the causes of the decline, a study conducted by APPO on the future of the oil and gas industry in Africa in the light of the energy transition established that the biggest challenge to the growth and development of Africa's oil and gas industry has been the near complete dependence on others for the survival of the industry on the African continent. The study showed that for about 100 years that Africa has been producing oil and gas, most African countries had come to accept that they need not control the 3 key drivers of the industry, namely finance, technology, and markets, in order for them to benefit from their God-endowed natural resources. Many have been satisfied with receiving royalties and forex income from the sale of crude oil, with which they run their governments and expend on goods and services that are mostly produced abroad. For whatever reason, many come to believe that the industry is so capital intensive that Africans cannot raise the required funds to effectively run it, and so have to rely on external financiers. Hence, whatever we got from oil and gas sales largely went into running government and importing foreign produced goods, while investment in the industry was left to foreign investors. Equally, with the second key driver of the industry, namely oil and gas technology, came to believe that only the IOCs and international oil services have the capacity
I think
Sir, yeah, you're muted.
you're
Yes,
muted, sir.
Your Excellency.
I've been muted all along.
No, just for a few minutes.
Okay. Okay. Uh, many have been satisfied with
I think
receiving.
there's a network glitch. I don't know if it's from you.
Muted again?
No, please go ahead. We can hear you loud and clear now.
Did you get that where I stopped? That many have been satisfied with receiving
Yes.
royalties and forex income from the sale of crude oil, with which they run their governments and expend on goods and services that are produced abroad. For whatever reason, many have come to believe that the industry is so capital intensive that Africans cannot raise the required funds to effectively run it, and so have to rely on external financiers. Hence, whatever we got from oil and gas sales largely went into running government and importing foreign produced goods, while investment in the industry is left to foreign investors. Equally, with the second key driver for the industry, namely oil and gas technology, we came to believe that only the IOCs and international oil service companies have the capacity to develop that technology, and that we cannot match them. And as we were taught in their schools, the law of comparative advantage says that why spend so much to produce by yourself, for yourself, what you can get from others at a much cheaper cost. So, the few oil and gas research institutions that we have on the continent do not even pretend that they are making any effort to make scientific and technological breakthroughs in the oil and gas industry. They are established more or less as status symbols in their countries. The third driver is market for our oil and gas. Right from the beginning, the African oil and gas industry was not established to serve the African people. And this is particularly so in sub-Saharan Africa. That explains why virtually all the energy infrastructure, pipelines, terminals, and etc. that you find on the continent run from the fields to the seaports for export from Africa to other parts of the world. For whatever reason, we have been made to believe that energy is expensive and that our people are too poor to buy it. So we continue to export it and use the forex to meet the expensive lifestyles of our elites. Is Africa that really poor that all this while it has not been able to raise the funds to finance its energy projects? Since we are speaking about Nigeria, let me try to answer this question using Nigeria. According to OPEC, cumulative crude oil production by Nigeria between 2000 and 2010 was 7,625,477,000. Ladies and gentlemen, may wish to recall that Am I lost again? No.
Not at all, sir. We're following you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may wish to recall that the golden years for the oil exporters was the years 2003 to 2008, when oil prices rose steadily from $22 per barrel to nearly $150 per barrel. Multiply 7.6 billion by just 35% of the windfall from that era. Invest that money to create a bank for the energy industry in Nigeria, and Nigerians will not be looking desperately for foreign investors for the energy sector. Other countries outside Africa saved more than double of their windfall because they were more forward-looking. The bank would also have facilitated the development of the technology of the industry and also created the required energy infrastructure to facilitate the development of sub-regional and regional energy markets. Ladies and gentlemen, what I've said about Nigeria applies to most other sub-Saharan African countries. North African countries have, to a large extent, done much better than sub-Saharan Africa in this respect. I must also acknowledge that even within sub-Saharan Africa, some countries have made more progress than others. Nigeria is certainly one of those that has made it ahead. So are we going to continue to lament? No. At APPO, we believe that the era of lamentations are gone. Africa and Africans have to take their destiny into their own hands. And APPO is leading by example. Beginning with a practical solution to the imminent funding challenge, APPO went into partnership with the Africa Export-Import Bank, Afrexim, to establish the Africa Energy Bank, AEB, with headquarters in Abuja, Nigeria. Established to have equity share capital of 5 billion, the AEB is created to fill the gap created by the withdrawal of the traditional financiers of Africa's oil and gas industry, ostensibly due to climate concerns. Between mid-2022 and last year, the establishment agreement and the charter of the bank were completed and approved by the founding institutions. By the end of last year, the required number of countries to sign and ratify the agreement to make it a treaty had done so, thus making the bank a legal entity. The position for the president was advertised a couple of months ago, and a consulting firm is doing due diligence on the applications. We are working on constituting the first General Assembly and the Board of Directors of the bank. Work on the headquarters of the bank is near completion. We look forward to announcing the launch of the bank before the end of this quarter. Ladies and gentlemen, APPO is not limiting its rescue mission to addressing the finance challenge. We are also working on addressing the technology challenge in order for Africa to be able to control the technology of the industry. The model that African oil and gas producing countries have practiced since they became oil producers has failed them. It's high time a new model was found. And what is the failed model? The failed model is a model where each African oil and gas producing country establishes oil and gas research and development centers, some as arms of their NOCs, others as extensions of the Ministries of Science or Ministries of Education. In most cases, these R&D centers claim to do research and development. But from what we saw during our visit to these centers, many are no better than glorified high school laboratories, as they are mostly poorly funded, poorly equipped, and without the right professors. The new model for oil and gas technology development in the continent, which APPO is championing, is the creation of regional centers of excellence in the various sectors of the industry, where member countries pool resources and collectively invest in making selected institutions regional centers of excellence. I'll give you an example. About a year plus ago, we went to one APPO member country. We were shown a beautiful edifice, a building that even in Europe, you can say this is good. It's supposed to be the National Oil and Gas Research and Technology Development Institution. After that, in the evening, we went to visit the Minister of Finance. And the minister was saying, look, we've done this. We need the money to equip it. And I said, how much are you looking at? He gave a huge amount in dollars. And I said, Excellency, how many barrels do you produce? What is the population of your country? Why do you need to do this when right across your neighbor, they have exactly what you have done and is equipped? Why didn't you think it made sense for you to go there, sit with them and say, look, we have X students coming every year. We want to be part of this. That way, you didn't need to build this building. You have used the money to do something more important for the development of your country. The thing is, each African country wants to own everything, this silo mentality. We have, to a large extent, succeeded in changing this mindset. And what we are to do this, we introduce a forum of chief executive officers of APPO member country NOCs. Then we introduce a forum of directors of oil and gas research and development institutions and the forum of directors of oil and gas training institutions. The Secretariat organizes regular meetings of members of these fora, and these meetings are deliberately rotated among the different institutions. Apart from deliberations on the challenges of the industry, members are taken around to see what the host institution has in terms of R&D tools and equipment, teaching and research manpower, other facilities, and even be briefed about the budget of the institutions. The objective for rotating the venues of the meeting is to make all participants aware of where their institutions stand relative to others. In other words, it is to disabuse the minds of some local champions that they have the best centers when they have not seen what obtains in other countries. That way, it is easier for us to have an agreement on the first set of institutions to select as centers of excellence in oil and gas research in the various regions of the continent. We are doing the same with the training institutions. Once a center is classified as a regional center of excellence, it moves from being national institution to an international institution with multi-stakeholders. That way, we can all pool our resources together for the good of the continent. Finally, to address the market challenge, APPO has partnered with the Central Africa Business Energy Forum, CABEF, to conceptualize and begin work on the creation of the Central Africa Pipeline System, CAPS, a comprehensive pipeline system for oil and gas products and that will traverse 11 Central African countries. This August in Bangui, the head of state of CEMAC shall consider and recommend the recommendation of the CEMAC Secretariat on the CAPS project. Ladies and gentlemen, isn't it a paradox that the continent with the largest proportion of the world's population living with no access to modern energy, with some 600 million people with no access to electricity and about 1 billion with no access to any form of modern energy alone, also exporting 75% of its crude oil and 45% of its gas to earn dollars to meet immediate and short-term needs. Why have we failed to appreciate the centrality of energy to national development? Show me one country that has been able to change the lives of its people for the better without making energy access to a vast majority of its people, not just to light their homes, but also to assist them with their economic activities. I cannot conclude these remarks without throwing a challenge to the organizers of this forum and to the participants, who I understand are mostly young lawyers. The challenges facing the oil and gas industry are not limited to finance, technology, and markets. These are obvious, but equally serious is the regulatory regimes of the industry. In this respect, instances abound across the African continent where our lawyers, either due to lack of experience or other considerations, have led their countries into signing oil and gas contracts or advising on putting in place oil and gas laws and regulations that are not in the best interest of our countries and our continent. Your vocation as lawyers calls for trust and confidence. Let that guide whatever you do. That way, we will leave behind a better continent for our children and future generations. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I want to see reactions going off in the comment section and on the live link. This was a very, very thought-provoking keynote address. We're very grateful. And I'm also personally grateful because it sets the scene for the discussions that would follow with the panel session. And we were really, really, really grateful for it. So, and before we go into the panel session, just permit me a minute or two to invite and introduce our panelists for today. And I mean, in no particular order, first person on our list is Mrs. Oghogho Makinde, who is the partner and head of the energy practice at Aluko and Oyebode law firm. Right. Just a very brief intro and citation. Mrs. Makinde is a partner in Aluko and Oyebode, where she heads the energy, natural resources, and infrastructure practices. Our core practice areas are energy, natural resources, public-private partnerships, private equity, corporate restructuring, divestitures, infrastructure, finance, and regulatory compliance. And for numerous impactful work on this core practice areas, she has received a lot of global recognitions, including rankings as a leading individual, and also an IFLR women leader. And she's also recognized in a lot of legal ranking directories. She's a board member of the Women in Energy Nigeria Network. She's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Organization of Nigeria. She's a member of the Association of International Energy Administrators, the NBA, the International Bar Association, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators UK, Nigerian Gas Association, and the list goes on and on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, with a rousing applause wherever you are, please kindly help welcome Oghogho Makinde to our virtual panel stand. Thank you. And Ms. Makinde, if you're here, you could just say hello to us while we'll call on the other speakers as well.
Good morning, and thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much, man. Up next on our list is Rosario. I'm very pardon me in advance for the pronunciation. And I hope you get to correct me. Rosario Osobase. And she's the chair of the Petroleum Contractors Trade Section and also the managing director at Tenaris, Nigeria. Welcome, ma'am. She's an accomplished energy executive with nearly 2 decades of cross-industry experience and the very first female managing director of Tenaris, Nigeria, where she leads the company's strategic industrial and commercial operations while advancing stakeholder engagement and sustainability. She holds several other influential roles across the energy industry, including serving as a council member of the Nigerian Content Research and Development Council, where she helps shape national research and development priorities for the oil and gas sector. She also sits on the board of Women in Energy Network and an associate of the Women in Management and Business in Public Services, WIMBIS, where she champions diversity, inclusion, and empowerment within the business and public services sector. She's also recognized amongst top 50 most inspiring women and top 100 career women in Nigeria, and has been the recipient of the Nigerian Oil and Gas Rising Star Award and the 2024 Woman in Upstream Energy Award. She is a first-class graduate of computing at the University of Bradford and has an executive MBA from the IMD Business School, graduating with honors. And we're very glad and grateful to welcome her to the stand. If you could just say hello to us, and thank you for joining.
Thank you for your kind introduction, Omotayo, and good morning, everyone. Very lovely to be here.
Thank you very much. All right, so we also have with us the General Manager Operations and Integrity at Heritage Energy Operational Services Limited, Nelson Wilbert. Wilbert is a seasoned energy industry leader with over 30 years of experience spanning operations, engineering, and executive roles. Currently general manager at Heritage Energy. And Heritage Energy, for those of us who don't know, is the operator of the oil mining list 30 joint venture, and there it drives performance and operational excellence. But before that, it was the country director for SLB in Nigeria. He is a chemical engineering graduate and has worked across both service and operator sides of the industry. His career has included assignments in Europe, in the US, and West Africa, and this gives him a very broad global perspective on the oil and gas landscape. And we're very grateful to have him here with us because we also know that he's very passionate about developing young professionals and broadly championing, impactful policies to support the future of Nigeria's energy sector. Mr. Wilbert, we're very happy to have you here, and if you could say hello to everyone.
Thank you very much, and great to see everyone here. I'm happy you're maxed out, so this is a great platform to be in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, for our panel, we have Dr. Wisdom Enang, who is a mechanical engineer and energy expert with distinguished academic and professional backgrounds. He has undergraduate, master's, and doctoral degrees from the University of Bath in the UK, and currently is an energy consultant and senior analyst to several international energy companies and media outlets, and is also an adjunct professor of energy engineering at the University of North Dakota in the USA. Dr. Enang has led over 20 oil and gas execution projects just between 2015 and 2020 alone, and he has managed operations across 24 shallow water assets in Nigeria. He's a chartered engineer, fellow of both Nigerian Society of Engineers and Nigerian Institute of Safety Engineers. He's also an internationally published researcher in carbon capture, energy economics, operations integrity, and oil and gas policy. He has advised severally on oil and gas industry reforms in Nigeria and frequently contributes expert commentary on governance, local content, and domestic gas sector development. He has been recognized severally for this, for his work and contributions. He has a key scientific article certificate from Advances in Engineering and awards from professional bodies such as Lawyers in Oil and Gas Network. And beyond his work as an engineer and as a consultant, he's also deeply committed to youth empowerment and mentoring, and has been honored by several community groups for his impact in education and national development. Dr. Enang, we're very grateful to have you here, and thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. If you could
Thank you very much.
hello.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Lovely, lovely. And before we dive into the panel session, for our listeners, you would agree with me that what we've tried to do here is create a very cross-functional and diverse, a group of panelists so that we can have conversations that cuts across some of the key areas that affect the theme that we're talking about. So the thing about law and contracts and all of that is that we do not exist in vacuum. We provide services to these clients, and whose sometimes decisions and work translate into incremental production for us. And the goal with this conversation is to try and touch all of the key aspects of the theme for today, and really dive into what the key challenges are, what the hurdles are, and what we can do to increase oil and gas production in Nigeria. So we'll dive into the conversation now, and I think that's maybe a good place to start is to very quickly go back to His Excellency Dr. Omar Farouk, and I mean, as I said, the tone for the key drivers that we have. But I guess one interesting aspect you mentioned is the new Africa Energy Bank, which would be headquartered in Nigeria. And for those of us that have been following, developments in that regard, it's something that is exciting. We have a new Africa Energy Bank, but also, I guess the question is, I mean, I know you've said to us that before the end of this quarter, the bank would be fully set up and the headquarters would be ready. But our question is, in terms of the funds that would be disbursed from the bank, right? What share of those funds can you say would realistically back Nigeria's push to reach our oil and gas production targets? And because this funds is not for Nigeria alone, but what do you see in terms of the funds coming in into our sector, and how that would help improve oil and gas production? Yes, you're muted if you're speaking, sir.
Just a point of correction. I was a journalist before I went into oil, so I'm extra careful. The exact words I said was that the world will be informed on the date of the launch of the bank before end of the quarter. I didn't. We are working to make sure that we launch by the end of September, but I didn't. So let's be very clear. Now, because I don't want tomorrow to say it's after September, and Omar Farouk said, now.
Yes, I completely understand that. Thank you.
The bank, we are working on constituting the board of the bank. The board of the bank is going to comprise those who are the shareholders, those who have put their money there, and the promoters of the bank, that is Afro-Exim Bank and APPO. Determining how much goes to which region of the continent or which country is not that of the promoters. Ours, as promoters of the bank, is to set up the bank, say these are what you are established to do. It's not, I cannot at this moment tell you that this is what Nigeria will get or not. That's the work of the board and the various committees that is going to set up to determine who gets what. But I can assure you that as we stand today, Nigeria is the leading contributor in that bank. And by being the leading contributor, I do expect that Nigeria, as a large shareholder, will say that these are the projects that are important for us, and we want it supported, and it should be done.
Lovely. Thank you for that. And I guess that provides some comfort, and also means that that's something to watch out for and follow, so that we can, as Nigeria, and I mean, shape how the funds are deployed, and also how that contributes to our development. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. So we'll come back with some of the other questions we have. I mean, now to I guess my next question is to Makinde, and it's to take us back to what the legal foundation is for all of these ambitions that we have, right? And what we want to go back to is the PIA, which is now 4 years in effect. And I guess the question to ask is, do you think that we spent a lot of time before the PIA could be passed, over 2 decades, just trying to, make sure that we provide for everything and we satisfy all of the stakeholders? Do you think that the PIA and how it has been implemented in the last 4 years with regulations issued by both the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission and the Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, and all of the other supporting presidential executive orders that we've seen in recent times on fiscal incentives, on local content enhancement, on cost efficiency? Do you think that um, that these developments, right, um, genuinely made Nigeria's upstream arena more attractive for investments, more transparent, more attractive? Do you think that the PIA has been able to do that in the last 4 years?
Thank you, Omotayo. That is a very wide-ranging question, and I think it deserves a panel on its own. Before I answer the PIE specific question, I would like to really thank His Excellency Dr. Omar Farouk Ibrahim. He has laid a really brilliant groundwork and framework for what we're discussing today. And I'll take us back to a bit of the history on how we arrived at where we are today, which is, in my personal view, in a bit of a crisis with regards to our production levels, because production levels do not align with our vast resources, which require for a whole range of life-changing matters, to be honest, as a country. Now, when I was preparing for this panel, I just took a look at our production levels across the decades, and you can see, as His Excellency had said, this is ebbed and flowed. So when we set this target for the end of 2025, the question is it actually groundbreaking, or is it just trying to match up to where we were almost two decades ago, which really should be cause for concern for every one of us. When you look at in the early 90s, we were in the range of 2.2 million barrels per day. And by the time we got to the end of 1999, we were actually above 2 million consistently, even right up to I would say 2014. We're really hovering between 2.2, 2.4, 2.16, which were quite impressive. Then all of the challenges that we're all well aware of. Now, on the PIA, the PIA was a long time in friction. There were a lot of curbs around its enactment. It took a while. As an important piece of legislation, it is understandable why it took so long in its enactment. Different stakeholders, different interests, both on the government side, on the public sector side, on the community side. A whole lot of issues had to be taken into consideration, and finally we had the PIA. Would we call it a perfect piece of legislation? Maybe not, but at least it provided the framework, the foundation upon which the total overhaul of the Nigerian oil and gas sector is underpinned, and that is what the regulatory regime that has been set up under the PIA is now trying to cover up. I was talking to a colleague last week, and we were joking about the fact that every other Monday there's a new regulation by the NUPRC. But these regulations are really important. And why are they important? Because they do help to clarify the PIA. The PIA has a lot of groundbreaking provisions. It changed the fiscal regime, changed the licensing regimes, even created multiple regulatory agencies. It provides clarity for the sector, which is what both the government and the investors and operators in the sector have always wanted for over two decades. So the regulations by the NUPRC and the regulations issued also by the NMAMDPRA, I keep missing the acronym, are critical because they provide clarity on the operative sections and provisions of the PIA. So when you see if you take a cross section of the regulations that have been issued by the NUPRC today, we have had regulations on licensing, we've had regulations on royalties, we've had regulations on environmental health and safety, licensing fees, consent approvals, processes and procedures that help to implement and clarify the provisions of the PIA. I think that where we find ourselves today is an inflection point, and it's really important what the government is trying to do, because this administration, I would say in the first time in about a decade, it very clearly focused on ensuring that it will provide a foundation, a fiscal and regulatory foundation for increasing our daily production levels. And it is important in the sense that without these foundations, you cannot increase production levels just by talking. There are foundational steps that need to be taken, which is why the executive orders by the president and the regulations by the NUPRC are critical, because they provide the legislative and policy foundation for increasing the volumes. Now, if you look at the executive orders that have been issued by the president in 2024, I took a snapshot of them, and you will see that they cover from tax incentives, which is critical for investors, and particularly in our deep water developments, which are where we have our largest reserves right now. The deep water developments require a lot of investment. I hear what His Excellency had said earlier on the African nations overly relying on international investments for developments in the energy sector. These deep water operations require a lot of funding, and it's critical that the presidency has recognized this and is willing to grant further tax incentives and investment allowances for eligible deep water productions, as well as the non-associated gas operations. We have always focused on the associated gas operations, which is good, and the NUPRC has issued regulations around the commercialization of those gas resources, because historically they have been flagged, and that is another policy thrust of the NUPRC that is very important in increasing the gas production in the country and making gas available for local industrial uses. And now the presidency has also issued an executive order on the tax incentives on the deep offshore oil and gas productions, and that was also this 2024. So when you take all of these 2024 executive orders in cohesion, what we see is very clear strategic push towards ensuring that any of the crinks that are currently in the sector are evened out, so that operators find themselves in a conducive environment for being able to leverage on the operations. One that I find particularly very important is the one on the on the reduction of petroleum sector contracting costs. Nigeria has historically had, from the available data, the highest production levels across the oil producing world. And it is critical that these are reduced, because it helps in improving outcomes, commercial viability for projects, as well as improving revenue to both government and the investor. So the cost efficiency incentives executive order, very important, and I think that they lay critical foundation for operators to ensure that they are able to show clearly measurable cost efficiency, upon which they now get additional incentives from the government. So I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. And I mean that really helps us understand what the lay of the land is in terms of what is possible in terms of law and policy. But I guess at this point, I mean, also just to take a temperature check in the room with the panelists and go back to, we've listened to Dr. Omar, Farouk, Ibrahim, we've listened to you on what the regulatory landscape and incentive landscape is like, but do we actually believe that these ambitions that we have, these production targets that we have are achievable? And just so it's a bit specific, I know that a lot of the numbers floating around, but for 2025, the NPRC had earlier said 2.5 million barrels per day, 2.1 million barrels per day. But there's also a project 1 million, which says by 2026 or 2027, it needs to be 2.5 million barrels per day. So I want to go to the operators one by one, starting with Mr. Wilbert. Do you think that this targets are achievable at all? Right? That's the first place to start. Do you think that we're being realistic? I know that in previous years, right, we've done better than this, but given our situation now, given our circumstances now, do you think that those targets are achievable?
So thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. The simple answer to your question is yes, but it's not something we're going to stumble into. The numbers actually, just a few years back, the Honorable Minister of Petroleum had actually said, Minister of State for Petroleum, was actually aiming for 4 million barrels. Right now, that was the sort of ambition that we wanted, and that's like His Excellency said, we were already at 2 point whatever it was, without condensate, right? So we have that potential. Now, if you look at it, just go through the workflow, right from the subsurface to surface, and then beyond. Surface, subsurface, we have it, right? We haven't even tapped into the deep reserves in Nigeria, which requires a little bit of maybe more technology to go into the high pressure, maybe even high temperature zones. So we haven't even touched that. We're talking about somewhat shallower productions. We have the oil, we have the gas. Now, do we have the wells that will optimally support these numbers? Simple question, it's a yes or no. Most of the wells that we have today are quite old. Completions and technology for those wells quite old indeed. If you go back to when the first oil well in Nigeria was discovered, and even production since then, we have wells that predate Nigeria's independence. Some of them are still flowing today with completions and equipment of that era. Now, if we even go way beyond that to the surface, right from the wellheads to the choke points, if you will, at the separators, the sort of assets that we have in place, we have so many of these choke points in place, not to talk about the man-made problems, part of the surface ones, which has to do with security or vandalism or indeed militancy around these areas, and of course the theft, right? So to answer your question, yes, it is doable, but there are very clear steps that need to be taken. And I'm very aware of the steps by the federal government to address this, starting with some of the good work being done by the Joint Task Force Operation Delta Safe to reduce the theft of production, and also bring sanity to the Niger Delta in particular. I'm also aware of some of the work that is being done even in the northern part of the country to get more reserves coming I'm also aware of some of the investment that is being done on the pipelines to ensure that we have new pipelines and we're not damaging the environment by having leaks from fatigued pipelines. And I'm also aware of some of the work that, or the directive that has been given to get more wells in place to boost the production in our mature fields. In addition to the explanation or the talk by the previous speaker, where we now have the legislature or legislation to support that. Now, it's not perfect, but it is a step forward, and it's always easier to fix as we start implementing. This has been implemented, and we're already seeing some of the benefits from this. So again, back to your original question, yes, it is possible, but we have to be very deliberate about it. Thank you.
Thank you, and yes, thank you, for Ms. Rosario. I don't know. Do you agree? Do you agree with Mr. Wilbert? You know, where H1 2025 is gone, and we're still doing about 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, depending on if you add condensate. Do you think that is achievable? Uh, and do you think it's also conditioned on all of the things that Mr. Wilbert has mentioned?
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity as well to share my view. And I couldn't agree more. It's a yes for me as well. The potential has always been there. I recall the early years of my career, and I like to say this story because in this platform, I think it would bring Beth to the reason why I think that there is potential. And in the early years of my career, 2005, as His Excellency said, I recall that this was a peak period in time, and in those days, we were popping wells, like you're popping water boreholes. Nelson was my boss, and I recall I got into the industry in a high growth era, and one of the things that were critical to the success of the industry was bringing on wells in real time. And so I recall drilling about 18 wells on Bonga, the same prolific Bonga that till date we still are looking at doing the phase Bonga North and the Southwest as well. And so it gives me immense, let's say, excitement to see the direction that this current administration has taken in terms of understanding what the priorities are very clearly and showing a strong political will by the reforms that have been put in place. Obviously, the biggest gaps are always the execution gaps that's hindering production. Nelson has mentioned the security concerns, which I see that has now been brought under control. I agree that the direction that they have taken recently with the Delta Safe and some technology to aid monitoring and surveillance is proving effective. At least we're no longer losing the 300 to 400,000 barrels that we were seeing mid-2022 and the rest. I also agree with aged assets. I see this lens a lot because obviously I work for a pipe manufacturing company, and you would imagine that around Nigeria, what you see a lot is aged assets and pipeline assets, conveying crude from one place to the other. And asset integrity is an issue. Apart from the fact that, asset integrity is an issue, there's also constrained infrastructure. So at the end of the day, if we need to bring wells on stream, there's also need to have adequate infrastructure that can cater for the needs of the well or the flows through the pipelines. So I do agree with that point as well. A point that Oghogho mentioned, I would touch base on and call it, project delivery and operational efficiency has always been a challenge. And in a country where we have one of the highest, let's say, cost per barrel, $25 to $45 is high. In other climes, we're looking at sub $10 per barrel. And so if we're looking and realistic in the target that we have defined for ourselves, there is urgent need to address all the cost and operational inefficiencies that exist in the entire ecosystem. I also see that based on the political will and the new restructuring around the NNPC, that direction is also somewhat stabilized. In the last oil and gas conference, the GCEO of the NNPCL announced 100% pipeline recovery on all the pipelines, the major pipelines in the country. That's significant step compared to where we're coming from mid 2020s, where we were below almost 0%. And so when I look at all these factors put together in terms of the execution gaps, addressing the cost efficiency challenges, the project delivery challenges in real time in a way that's proactive is one of the ways that I think that we can bridge this gap. I already see that in May of this year. I don't know if Oghogho mentioned that point. Obviously, there was another set of reform in place, the Upstream Petroleum Operations Cost Efficiency Initiative. And the idea is now to reward cost efficiency in a way that the overall cost of the project is kept and the projects are met in a timely way. And so when we see all these reforms that are being thrown into the industry, it gives me confidence that the potential of 2.1 million barrels and beyond is there.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I do tend to agree with Nelson in that view.
Thank you very much. And that's a very comprehensive overview of the key drivers as well. Dr. Enang, I know a lot has been said about this, but just in like 2 minutes or less, we just wanted your views on whether you agree as well. And maybe I think another source of pessimism amongst people is, now that we have most of the IOCs leaving the onshore and shallow water assets, right? Do we believe that the indigenous operators taking over have what it takes to sustain the kind of production efficiency that sustains the or achieves the targets and sustains it? So what do you think about this as well, Dr. Anna? Just very quickly before we move on to the other issues.
Thank you very much. I think your question kind of speaks to the point I was trying to make earlier. First, I think one of the best things that's happened to us is seeing through, in a reasonably stable way, the whole divestment process. And I speak from my own experience. Now, in March of 2025, Seplat, did record an increase of about 50,000 barrels per day of production from the mobile field. And it's not surprising, right? Because I'll tell you what happens. You may wonder, how come that happened just pretty quickly as soon as Seplat took over? This is what happens. Now, before companies eventually physically divest, they have mentally divested. So when they're looking at projects, a lot of those project considerations, they're looking at a global pool of funds that they want to tap into. And your project is competing with a project in Mozambique. You're also competing with a project in Papua New Guinea and also in Guyana. So what that means is that if you're not, having the best opportunities on offer, well, the IOCs will simply do a very lovely design and then put it in a shelf. They'll put designs on how to, restore facilities. They'll put designs on how to enhance with gas lift or gas injection or whatever, but they'll put it in the fridge. But what has happened is with the divestment, Seplat, for example, knows that this is home. Whatever projects you're going to be considering is going to be considered on the basis of each of the opportunities that we have in country. And so that already means that there is an increased attention. Most of those facilities that would have been not operational, not because they cannot flow, to the top side, but because the facility has integrity issues that has not been addressed, and so you cannot flow to those assets, and then they were shelved. So what Seplat did was to go in there and turn around the asset integrity and then flow some of those assets. So for me, I think the whole concept of divestment has meant that the companies now take ownership, and it's a Nigerian project, and there's a new focus on making it work for us, and so that's why we're seeing increased numbers from even the indigenous players.
Thank you very much, Dr. Enang. This is a very interesting perspective, and I think the example you're giving is very, very apt. and workforce. Now that we're running our own assets, we know that there's no competing assets in another jurisdiction to run away to. So there's an incentive to maximize those assets as fast as we can. Thank you very much for that. We'll move to the next round of questions, but I just wanted to mention, just as a process check, that because we have questions and we have limited time, we would be very well served if our responses are very concise, maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes maximum, so that we can touch on all of the key aspects. Your Excellency, Dr. Farouk, I mean, everyone here seems to agree that if we do the right things, we would be able to meet our targets. But you know, from as a lawyer, that's raises a point, about our commitments internationally, right? Especially to the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, where you've once served as
You're frozen. Or is it here?
We seem to have lost him.
I think we lost him.
Thought I was the only one.
Give him a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I think I don't know if I'm being heard, but I think Omotayo has a network challenge.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Okay, Omotayo is back.
Yes.
We can.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I had a glitch in my network. But the question I was asking Dr. Omar Farouk is how we can balance our production aspirations with the OPEC quota that's been given to us. I guess around 1.5 million barrels, right, per day now. So how do we balance that out?
I think there's been a huge misunderstanding about OPEC and OPEC quota. Yes, I worked as Nigeria's governor to OPEC for 5 years. But more importantly, I worked in the OPEC Secretariat for 7 years. And I remember in 2016, we had a serious challenge. OPEC was saying that we're producing about 300 barrels, 1,000 barrels, more than what was our allocation. And I said, I'm sorry. I honestly don't even believe that we are producing up to our allocation. OPEC does not rely on what a member country gives it, what you call the direct communication. They rely on third parties. Sarah argues there are about 5 or 6 of them. What did we do? I asked the minister, give me a team from NNPC, DPR, and the ministry. We are going to these places and ask them to justify to us how they got those figures. We went to the US, we went to Paris, we went to London. By the time we returned, we were able to go to OPEC and say that if we can produce another 700,000 barrels, we will still be within our limits. Now, how does OPEC do these allocations? We should not sit and say that because we have a 1.5 million barrel allocation, we should not aspire to produce 2.5 million. OPEC allocates quota not just on what you have in the as reserves, but your capacity to produce. If you consistently show that you can produce more than what has been allocated to your country, you go and it's negotiated and you go up until it gets to a point when you can't do it. You can't. Many countries are given quotas and they don't meet it. And when you don't meet it, there's global shortage. And when there's global shortage, the organization is blamed for, So I think that we have no cause. Yes, maybe the first month, 2 months, 3 months. But if you are able to prove that I have the capacity as a country to produce more than this. The quota is not permanent. It keeps changing. I say this because this has been used by a number of IOCs to kind of pressure the government. Look, we are not benefiting from being OPEC. I believe that if we are out of it and say the whole system collapses, we are going to be the worse for it.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind insights. And I think it helps because, yes, there's a lot of misconceptions about what the OPEC quota means and whether it's it's a restriction on your aspiration as a country. But I guess from you, we now have that clarity, right? If you do more than that, you can always justify it and get it increased. And that should be our focus, not thinking of it as a limiting factor. Thank you very much for that, Your Excellency. Now, I think our next question would be on some of the key drivers that have been spoken about in the course of this conversation, and I would go to Dr. Enang now on production costs. Right, we grapple with one of the world's highest upstream oil production costs, cost per barrel, very prohibitive according to a lot of people. And what do you think are the main structural or those keeping expenses high? What can we do now in the short term and prioritize to reduce those elevated costs?
Well, I mean, from what has been said, and very rightly so, you can see very quickly that the security is one of the biggest sources of production costs, and the lack of, I'd like to say, kind of innovative approach that we take means that a lot of things cannot be automated as much as we would want it to be. I think those are the two things, and then the assets themselves. Some of those assets means that you have to put in more money, and then you have to, go around in more costly ways to be able to do safe productions. So I think those are the three key ones. Now, for the security thing that we're talking about, I mean, there's been a lot of efforts from the government of the day to drop the losses from from security related losses. There's still more that can be done. Now they've been dropped to about, the last data I saw is about 5,000 barrels per day worth of losses that we're looking at. That has been achieved simply by integrating, sort of synergy between the government securities and the sort of community securities, and also making sure that there's deepened host community relations. So that just shows you what we've been able to achieve from the sort of hundreds of magnitude of losses to about 5,000 barrels. Now, where can we take this further? That's what I'm going to be talking on for a few seconds. We can take this further by approaching this with a method I'll call the PDRR, predict, detect, respond, and recover. So, the predict and the detect happens to do with your use of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, big data, just trying to make sure that first you get the data, you analyze the data, because you've got to understand when you have outlier signals, because that could also give you some false signals. You've got to understand if you're using maybe parameters like the pressure, flow rates of the pipelines to monitor breaches, how do you genuinely differentiate an equipment disruption or something on, kind of an upset in the system versus a breach? And that's where data analytics will allow you to pick that data, analyze that data, and then be able to draw an inference as to whether a breach has actually taken place, or proactively help you to put measures in place to be able to respond to the situation. Now, the respond and recover is simply a technique that allows you to put the right, the right barriers in place. Because when you're talking about risk management, it's not always the case that we can eliminate risk fully, but we want to reduce the consequences of exposure as much as possible. So we do have risk barriers. Respond and recover, you're going to be asking yourselves, where have you identified maybe the areas around your pipeline or your equipment infrastructure and put some security codings around it? I mean, code 1 could be, or maybe you could use an amber, red, and green. Green meaning that that area is really not really affected by theft. Red meaning that we have a lot of theft happening, and then we have to reinforce security personnel. I mean, just taking informed decisions and positioning yourself to respond to such breaches is very important. And then the other part is tackling the socioeconomic issues that are leading to the theft. I mean, development of the society, the host community is something that really needs to happen. From the side of, making sure that the asset integrity is well up to standard. I have managed asset integrity before, and I tell you the best way we do it is that we always do a world round, just like the doctors would do in the hospitals, and then we pick up items, and then immediately we do not transfer those items and try to scope them as a project. We finish them as a maintenance activity. Because I can tell you what, the biggest thing that used to happen was when there was a dichotomy in most companies between operations and maintenance and the projects. And what happens is operations and maintenance will see an issue and they skip writing it, putting it down, and hoping that when it gets to a certain level, they will hand over to projects to execute. Once you start creating such gaps, it means that you're creating an avenue where more things will get bad, and there's going to be a lot of bureaucracy in fixing those things. So right now, most companies have streamlined to empower the operations and maintenance to fix issues as they occur. So that's one way that I think could be adopted to fix issues going forward from an operations and maintenance standpoint.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And this is very helpful. And I think it also begs the question, and this is for Mr. Wilbert. I mean, a lot has been said about technology and surveillance and fixing things as they come. But I think one thing that people also curious about is uh, uh, community-based surveillance contracts, pipeline surveillance, or other assets, critical asset surveillance, right? Saying that this helps with cutting down vandalism and theft and increasing overall security. And we just wanted to check what results you've seen in your own operations and what do you think about this as a strategy?
Thank you very much. This is a very interesting one. So at Heritage Energy, we've learned that sustainable asset protection is really fundamentally about trust, inclusion, and that shared value with all stakeholders, which includes the community. So the community-based surveillance isn't just a side program. It's actually cornerstone to our security and operational strategy, and its effectiveness it's showing in the results that we've already achieved. These contracts are locally structured and managed, giving communities control over the employment, oversight, and some of the grievance resolution. Now, if you look at the PIA, it also supports this. When we're talking about some of the legal framework to help achieve our aspirations, this is actually one of it. Individuals who have previously felt marginalized are now being turned into active protectors, creating genuine local ownership and economic opportunities, and significantly reducing incentives for sabotage or collusion. Because ultimately, the first ring or your best ring for security, it's actually the community ring, right? So our engagement models go quite deep. We layer benefit sharing frameworks and structured development initiatives over with this surveillance. Before the PIA or Petroleum Industry Act 2021, Heritage operated under the GMOU or Global Memorandum of Understanding with the communities. And we covered over 121 host communities, a model that delivered visible projects and created accountability through community development clusters. But the improvement we've seen with the PIAs, we've transitioned into institutionalized partnerships with the communities via what is referred to as host community development trust in the PIA, where we now have just 2 of that in our wide footprint. So these HCDTs institutionalize, 1, the funding, community governance, the project delivery, so that benefits become predictable, transparent, and directly tied to production stability. It's no longer a case of some local chief grabbing funds for the community and putting into their pockets. Now, this is almost clear to everybody, and it's been also looked at very closely by the commission, the NUPRC. So what has been most transformational is the alignment of interest between us and the communities. Communities now see that sorry, I think I was muted for a second there. Okay.
Yes. Please
all
go
right.
ahead.
So we're now seeing, or the communities are now seeing the steady productions delivering the schools they want, the health centers, the skill acquisition hubs, the microeconomic programs, the scholarships, all these things are now tied to the production stability. So areas that were once viewed as security hotspots are now becoming cooperation strongholds, and the community leaders themselves are amongst the most vocal advocates for the peace and progress within their community, because they can tie their progress to production. So we've deliberately differentiated this model from that opaque payment for peace or settlement arrangement that has embedded, or by embedding clarity, enforceability, and shared accountability. Now, maybe just to wrap up in here very quickly, how do lawyers, because at the end of the day, our audience is mostly about lawyers wondering, how do I really support all of this? Strengthening the legal infrastructure of HCDTs, drafting trust instruments, defining benefits, delivery clauses, and creating robust dispute resolution and transparency mechanisms. We will continue to evolve in there. And then the grievance part, making it structured and having clear feedback pathways, and then translating that alignment into enforceable commitments that tie protective behavior to development outcomes, making this cooperation visible. So thank you. I'll stop now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very, 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 very enlightening. And I think we can count it as one of the wins of the PIA, right? Just institutionalizing that host community relationship. And I know that for the lawyers here, also seeing in the law that particular section that allows you to a community rather to forfeit their entitlement when you can, when there is an act of vandalism or sabotage that you can say is from the community. So that also helps, keep people in check, knowing that, right, if it is also now you have an incentive to make sure that there's no unrest and everything goes well in your community, so that you don't lose money that comes from community development. And thank you very much for that. I guess the next part of our key issues would be to look at the contracting cycle, and no other person to call on from this than the MD of Tenaris. I know that you're a contractor and you work with a lot of companies. So from that perspective, right? And also one of the incentives Mrs. Makinde spoke about is, reducing the contracting timelines, right? It takes a long time to get contracts from, conception to execution and disbursement of funds. So just talking about that and, supply chain management resilience generally. And this is personal for me because I in my work, I support contract and procurement as a lawyer in Chevron's Nigeria and Mid-Africa business. So what strategies do you see from the contractor's perspective, despite all of these logistic disruptions, what strategies do you think that the contractors are using? First, to reduce the contracting cycle, and also to make sure that there's no disruption in the flow of equipment and services, because these are very key to, sustaining production and even increasing it in the short and long term.
Okay, thanks. That's a very interesting twofold question. Yeah, from the contracting cycle perspective, what has been done? It's very clear what has been done. Oghogho touched base on them with the presidential directives that were announced in March of last year. And I think there were three basic concepts that came out of the, let's say, the focus on the contracting cycle. One was the threshold that was now increased for operators to be able to handle procurement up to $10 million without seeking recourse to NMPC, NCDMB, NUPRC as such. And then the second one was the, let's say, shortening the cycle. And I've been in this industry for 20 years running, and we've seen tenders stretched to 6 years, 7 years, as a contractor. And the effects of FX, inflations, and all the global dynamics at play would normally impact on such, let's say, contracting processes in general terms. So yes, the reform in terms of contracting cycle is a welcome development for us in the contracting, let's say, segment. And we see it as a signal of regulatory willingness, to just move the industry forward. That being said, from our own lens, what are we doing? Apart from the fact that we see ourselves as critical enablers, I sit on the board and chairperson of the Petroleum Contractors Trade Section. So it gives me the vantage position to not just see the industry from the lens of the petroleum contractors, but also understand the key industry issues. And so we also act as not just an enabler, but also a driver, driving home the message and advocacy around what needs to be done to improve the industry contracting environment. And that's really what has led to some of these initiatives and reforms that are at place. So that's one of the main things I would say from that lens is, and looking at it from a local content slice, is pre-capacity and compliance audits that we continue to advocate for. Because obviously to build supply chain, which takes me to the second questions, to build robust and agile supply chains, we need to first start thinking, we are global in terms of what we are trying to reach, our outreach, but we need to start thinking of how we industrialize the economy for the gains that would be beneficial for the Nigerian ecosystem and the economy in general terms. And so those pre-capacity audits are things that as contractors, we are advocating for strongly as a way to sanitize the industry and remove or eliminate all the occurrences of middlemen or portfolio tokenism that is prevalent also in the industry that somewhat disrupts the supply chain processes. But that being said, the other thing that we also advocate for strongly and we also push from the contractor lens is early and close collaboration, not just with the contractor or contracting entities, but also with the operators, because obviously they have line of sight to their projects, and as such, collaboration, early collaboration is key to ensuring that we also on the contracting side are ready to support whatever projects are on the pipeline for the country. The other thing as well that we are seeing from the contractor lens is that a need for supplier diversification. Now, I was talking to one of the major customers, and they were saying, look, Rosario, in this tender, we're trying to avoid a situation where we just go to one mill to source pipes, because, for instance, if all the other entities are going to the same mills to source pipe, if there is a supply chain disruption in that mill or in that country or in that continent where the mill is located, then somewhat the pathway for that project may be impacted or delayed. And so we're beginning to see where operators are beginning to include in contracting processes a clear instruction to allow the diversification of supplier sourcing in a way that, okay, if we can source from Asia, we can source from Europe, we can source from the Middle East. I think the other point that, I like to hammer on a lot is the encouragement and patronization of local manufacturing, because obviously that's the way that you close the reach to the industry. And apart from the benefits that it has for the economy, it also has, a way to reduce those import delays with the description I just described in the supplier diversification perspective. And so these are some of the initiatives that we as contractors continue to push. For Tenaris, for instance, we're beginning to look, we know that, there are many buckets to strengthening the production process for the country. And so we're beginning to think, how can we even support segments that are not very well structured or do not plan, like let's say the more indigenous segments, the marginal field operators. So we are beginning to think of keeping speculative stock on the ground, although it's a cost, it's a cost to us. Working capital is also a mindset. And so at that, we're trying to limit exposure, but by keeping minimal stock on the ground that can serve the industry in a way that we have quick turnaround. And finally, I think scenario planning in today's age to make agile ecosystems, make agile supply chains. We learned in business school, you need to plan all scenarios. We're participating in the Bonga project just now. My company is participating in the Bonga project, and I can tell you that we're coating the pipes for Bonga not in country. And so there's a lot of preparation ongoing at the moment. The first batch of pipes have arrived, and the second batch we're expecting in September. But what we have done is that we've planned all scenarios to ensure that, we are proactive enough to be able to react in the events of any uncertainties. And I think resilience of the supply chain is about anticipating, not reacting, and collaborating logistic planning in a way that is across the operator-contractor value chain. I'll stop here for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that very interesting insight. Thank you. It's also very gladdening to hear that the Bonga FID is now, the Bonga project is now completely off the ground. And I guess what we would hope for in Nigeria is more FIDs, more contracts in that regard, right? And I also really, really like what you said about in-country manufacturing. I have a friend who would say, if you've ever had to deal with demurrage claims that you see it, you would really consider the locally manufactured alternative before you say that you bring it from abroad the next time. So thank you very much for that. I guess now just to go back to what we're saying about the regulatory framework, and this is for Oghogho Makinde, right? And we wanted some practical insights in the deals you've seen and you've worked on in the current regulatory dispensation. Just some insights into where the law has simplified deal making and regulatory compliance and investment decisions, making it easier than it would have been if we're not in this present dispensation. And where do you think uncertainty remains, and we need to pay attention to and probably pursue reforms in as we move forward?
Thank you very much for that question. And it's really interesting to see how the regulatory landscape is slowly changing the negative outcomes we have had in the past, particularly with timelines for final investment decisions. I recall working on a second LNG project in the early 2000s, and the FID took, in fact, it never occurred because after 5 to 6 years, all kinds of different issues came up, and that just underscores the need to have a proper regulatory framework, and also to reduce the political interference, and also the hoops that these projects need to go through to be able to make FID. What we saw in that project was markets just kept changing because of the delays in the FID, and at the end of the day, the whole thing had to be disbanded. Now, what we have seen with the PIA and also with the helpful regulations by the NUPLC is that there's more clarity, and there's more there's now the procedures and the processes that need to be followed are clearly set out. So companies are more confident in following those procedures and achieving faster outcomes. We have seen that there's more interact between the regulator and the investors, and then the clarity around the NNPC and its status and its new commercial status also has encouraged quicker decision making, and that is one outcome that I have seen. The clarity also around the field development plans, taking the FID and ensuring that there's certainty of funding arrangements for FIDs and for field development plans have also helped as well. So you're not doing the FID and then the funding conversation is will start. The NUPLC guidelines and the PIA now make it clear that there's actually would be financial decisions that will have to be made, and performance guarantees that will need to be provided to ensure that field development plans and FIDs can be backed up. These are new developments in the current regime that help to expedite these decisions. Now on the concerns side, not much of a concern, but the different regulatory hoops will need to be further refined, because the different regulators, you have the Nigerian Content Board, which has done a fantastic job in localizing large segments of the sector, but the engagements around the approving of particular aspects of contracts to ensure compliance need to be better refined, because those could cause clinks in the process, and also having multiple regulatory hoops as well. And now we even now see in some instances state authorities also coming in and demanding for information on contracting pipelines or projects or employment, and so all of this may cause a delay. So there has to be more refining of the procedures between the federal agencies and the subnationals to ensure that there's less friction in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And as we take those lessons, I think I guess the next question we would have, also just to check in with the operations lead here for Heritage Energy is, what do you think from your own perspective are those interventions that you would like to see, and you think that if those interventions are prioritized, they would go a long sorry, just to mute. Yes. So what I was saying is, what are those interventions from your own perspective that would go a long way in adding reliable barrels to our aspirations and our daily production side?
Okay. So there's quite a lot, and I think several of them have been addressed. We're not talking about just one number here that we sort of turn a switch. It's almost like that Tesco slogan, every little helps. So for us, the most immediate interventions need to be focused on unlocking existing capacity and removing the friction in execution. So if I have to list them, just to make them simple, first, the well surveillance and integrity restoration. So as already mentioned by a few of the speakers, we have many wells that are underperforming today or shut in for issues that can be fixed with just focused integrity work. Not a lot of stuff. Interestingly, we had one of our wells that had been shut in for over a decade because it wasn't producing properly. And by the time we went in just for some basic work, it had actually built up its own pressure and exceeded whatever intervention plan that we're planning to get from it. You know, the second is debottlenecking the flow assurance and measurement. Simply put, it's making sure that the infrastructure that we have, the separators, are performing right. There's proper, sorry, I'm trying not to go too technical here. There's proper control of our flow, the pressure balancing, metering reconciliation, which is very important in the industry, are all optimized so that production of oil is fully credited. Thirdly, as already mentioned earlier on, protecting the flow, you know, from theft and vandalism, right? So it's one thing to produce and not receive it at the other end where you can get some credit, you know, so that we don't lose the gains that we have upstream, downstream when we're trying to convert it from production to dollars. And then fourth is the predictive condition-based maintenance. And I'm trying to keep this without using too many of the buzzwords here, where we actually replace break-ins, combine them with clear execution triggers in contracts and approvals, right? So you can look at it as AI enabled. I know everybody's using that buzzword right now, and very few of us don't really know the real application of it. But AI applications can help with this, you know, where we are actually combining this with clear execution triggers in our contracts and approvals, ensuring timely intervention before small problems become big problems. So what we've done so far in Heritage is in our embedding all of this into our day-to-day operation. We're targeting our workovers. The workovers are essentially when you go back into existing wells and try to get them to produce more. We've also targeted our metering clarity, where there are now initiatives that are focused on this. What that means for us is whatever we produce upstream, by the time we get to the end of our complex pipeline, just before it gets into the boats or to the refineries, there isn't a loss in that pipeline, or there isn't a significant loss. And we're seeing reconciliation factors getting close to 100%. And then alignment of obligations between all parties to ensure that execution happens as planned. Working with the in-house technical team, working with the service industry that help us do most of the work to ensure that we have clarity and we're working as one team to ensure that we're delivering this. Now, these are very simple ones that we can do today. The very quick interventions that we had, the reliable barrel. It's not about, it's actually a marathon. It's not, let's ramp up today, because the wells don't work that way. If you overproduce from a well, you will very quickly lose the true maximum production that you can get from that well. So everything needs to be done deliberately, one step at a time. Now, where do lawyers come into this? Because I have to be very mindful. I need you to know how you will support us. Again, drafting service or intervention contracts that anticipate field variability, include operationally meaningful triggers for action, and avoid ambiguous language. I joke with my wife is a lawyer, by the way. I joke with her that when lawyers want to confuse us, they start going into Latin, right? Put it in English, right? So that everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. Secondly, define and codify measurements, reconciliation, attribution, and attribution terms very clearly so production disputes do not mask true performance. Because
Yeah.
like I think a phrase that is attributed to, I believe it's Churchill, where they say statistics, 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 and lies, right? If people can throw a lot of numbers at you and confuse exactly what they're trying to say. So let's be very clear on what is that. And then lastly, structuring a balanced risk-reward system and cost recovery framework. In some cases, with the service companies, we have all these performance contracts, right? Where they have a little bit of skin in the game. It's not a case of marketing. It's about delivering on what is promised. So I'll stop now. Mindful of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're running out of time, and we
Yeah.
would have loved to continue to go on and on, but thank you. And I think that your last remarks actually is the proper foundation for the final remarks of all of the other speakers. The major audience here is young lawyers, and more particularly young lawyers, and how we can, position ourselves for work now and for work in the future, and what those skills that needs to be mastered are in order to be not just a lawyer, but a lawyer that everyone wants to come to support
Webinar. It's very
them in this quest, right? So I guess just to take closing remarks from that perspective from the other speakers, Dr. Enang, from a more global perspective, what would be your advice to young professionals? What are the core skills, just very quickly in a minute or two, for credible advisory work in upstream oil and gas? What would you recommend?
All right. For lawyers, particularly, since we're talking to lawyers, I'd like to say the lawyers play a very critical role in ensuring that we have de-risked projects that will produce value. Because, no matter how we design as engineers, the whole project execution and everything, if the lawyers do not take a look at it, one clause would get us, grandstanding in the judiciary for a very long time. So, but what will help the lawyers to make an informed decision is, AI is a buzzword, and it has a lot of capabilities. And one of those capabilities is the ability to call, just with simple prompt words, call on several, experiential-based contexts to be able to let you know, okay, these are the kind of things that you think you should put into focus when you are perhaps in the saddle of having to draft such terms. Now, but that being said, the organization you'll be working for will have their own framework within which they will want to operate. But nothing says you cannot bring experiential basis to either contest some of that if it's not okay, or add some more value to it. And again, the future of oil and gas, like I've witnessed, is all about data-driven information. Looking at, are you able to do scenario analysis? Even lawyers can do scenario analysis. I mean, in the engineering, we do look at our risk models, and then we look at the nodal analysis. If this happens, what do we do? I think lawyers can do same. The risk, legal, could be quantifiable, and then you can go through and look at your response in each of the scenarios. And that is you need to be more analytical to survive, and be more adaptive and ready to embrace innovation to survive in the future of oil and gas.
Thank you very much, Dr. Enang. Just before I go for closing remarks from both Mrs. Makinde and Rosario, I wanted to say, for the young lawyers here, especially for those on YouTube, there's a feedback link being circulated now. Please fill the feedback forms, as we would use that and reconcile it with the registration data we have to process your CPD points and send them to you. Also, closing remarks, Mrs. Makinde first, for the young lawyers here, what would be your advice, and after that
We
we'll
can't
take
see the link. We can't see it.
also
Can you send it again?
Yes, I record
we
this.
will,
Can you send the link again?
I didn't contribute.
yes, it will be sent right now back on YouTube. Thank you.
Can you send it again?
My
Please go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you for that. My closing remarks to the young lawyers here would be the oil and gas sector is a very viable one, continues to grow. Different aspects keep coming up now, but it actually into this renewables. And Mr. Wilbert has talked about AI. There are all kinds of new developments in the sector. It is a viable practice area for young lawyers. I would advise understand the fundamentals of the sector, understand the laws, understand the regulatory regimes, understand the contracting principles so you are able to advise clients. I always would say, look, advise clients practically. I think Mr. Wilbert has said it best when he said, avoid the Latin terms, put it in clean, clear English, but first of all, develop a proficiency. And that means studying, doing the research, and really ensuring that you understand the fundamentals. The sector will continue to grow. I know there's been a lot of headwinds in the past in the global market, but the fact of the matter is this is going to be a growth sector in Africa because Africa is industrializing and Africa needs energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ma'am. Just 1 minute. Yes, this is Rosario. Please go ahead.
Okay, in addition to everything that all the other panelists have said, which I do agree, commercial savviness is key. A business mindset is also key. You're not just a compliance checker as a lawyer, you are a business enabler. And as such, I think, you need to build problem-solving skills that look at a holistic way to solve problems and bring that solution oriented mindset to play at B. The other thing I would say is that ultimately, in addition to what Oghogho has said, I believe that we need to stay relevant in the industry by understanding evolving regulation on a case-by-case basis, and adding, especially with the sustainability teams just now, ESG frameworks, understanding of ESG frameworks that allow you to holistically assess let's say risk in a holistic way. Finally, I would say from a contracting lens, we tend to see lawyers on the operating side focus on trying to protect the segment of the business, and it looks like it's a win-lose relationship. But it's important to understand that collaboration is the new cool. As technology drivers of the oil and gas industry, it's important that lawyers are able to build skills that help them ensure clear, balanced and contract terms that are favorable to both parties and not leaving one or either parties exposed. Generally speaking, eventually with those kind of skills, we can deliver the barrels and ensure competitive and sustainable approach to production. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And thank you very much to all of the speakers today. We're very, very grateful. We really appreciate your time. We thank you for taking your time to talk to us today. And thank you for a very, very interesting and engaging discussions. And I say on behalf of all of the participants here that we were leaving this session more knowledgeable about the sector. We're leaving this session with a better understanding of what the challenges are and what we can do in our own little ways, like Mr. Wilbert said, everyone can do in our own little ways to help, increase and sustain what is now the lifeline of our economy in Nigeria. We really appreciate your time, and we want to say thank you. This is 3 minutes over our contracted 2 hours, so we apologize for that. But thank you, and I guess we will be seeing each other as this progresses. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please, can you send the link?
Yes. So if you're on Zoom, you don't need to fill it. If you're on YouTube Live, yes, it will be resent now. Thank you very much. If you're on Zoom, we already have the attendance list. Thank you. Thank you, Marvelous. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely day. Thank you so much, Mr. Dr. Omar. Dr. Omar had to go into another meeting, so I'm sure we'll just end.
Thank you.